Hello, everybody. You're welcome to this webinar event in Basic Principles of Environmental. Hello, everybody. You're welcome to this webinar event in Basic Principles of Environmental Audit Reporting. I am Grace Balogun, an environmental sustainability consultant. And you welcome everybody. We really want to welcome everybody we have in the house, various participants from various walks of life. We see you, we'll say you welcome, Mr. Bassi, you welcome, Mr. Benjamin. And to mention a few, thank you so much for joining, Mr. Mpudu. We can see everybody in the house. We appreciate you all. Yeah, for us as an organization in Kevin Consulting Limited, we sure understand that environment has an influence on our nature and its support to life. Thus, its sustainability is very key. And that has inspired the birth of this webinar series. We at Kevin Consulting Limited will provide environmental health and safety solutions to clients across the globe, setting strategies and building culture that promotes effective operations to maintain safe and healthy environment. I want you to understand that one of our modes of support and promotion in Kevin Consulting is promoting the environmental engagement in providing information that drives a higher quality environment. We have offered services to A2C, IHS Towers, to Microsoft, to Brian Murrow, to Maradimar Investments, to Mirror Flash, pharmaceuticals, to mention but a few. And we are so blessed to have in the house a principal consultant in environment and sustainability with over 10 years experience, championing various given projects, various giant projects nationwide in environmental auditing, environmental compliance monitoring, environmental social impact assessment, investigation of organic substances in air, as well as various environmental services. In the course of this webinar, I want you to understand that we will be learning from our inspiring consultant who will bring up-to-date environmental audit insights, environmental audits, bold innovations, and also applications to the latest sustainable trends in environmental audit reporting. We might not be able to take questions during this webinar session, but though we will have you put on your questions on the chat box. If you have challenges as well relating to environmental audit, we would like you to put them in the chat box and we'll compile them during the end of the session. Of course, so far we'll be observing break time to time, and so feel relaxed and enjoy while learning. Our principal consultant will now take over. Ms. Ayodele Dari, thank you for joining.
Okay, thank you so much, Grace Balogun, for that warm welcome. I really appreciate it. And while I'm standing on the existing protocol, I want to welcome everyone to this webinar. The issue of environmental sustainability is indeed very key to our nations. And that was why we realized that, okay, we could share our knowledge on the principles of environmental audit reporting. So in order not to waste much of our time, let me dig right into the webinar info. So please, I want to confirm, can everybody hear me? Please, can everyone hear me?
Yes, you can from my end.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I also want to confirm if everyone can view my screen. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you all again for joining. My name remains Daria Ayodele, Kevin Consulting. So today we'll be discussing about the guidelines for environmental audit reporting. Like we've initially highlighted, this had become imperative due to the growing need for proper environmental auditing and also environmental review processes. I can also understand that on this webinar are consultants and also HSC personnel. Okay, please, can we all mute our mics? Thank you very much. So on this call, I can also understand that we have HSC consultants.
Your mic is mute.
Okay, can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll start again. So basically, I was explaining the need for this webinar and also highlighting areas that are of concern. And I also mentioned that this webinar is very necessary for the HSE consultants, environmental audit consultants, and also environmental compliance officers in different organizations. You are to learn how to conduct proper auditing and also how to review audit reports. So I'll be showcasing, highlighting areas where you need to pay attention to when you are reviewing, being a HSE officer for organization, having given the project to your consultant, and also for consultant, what are the principles that needs to guide you while preparing this topic. So the outline for my webinar, I'm going to discuss on what is environmental audit reporting, which is the basics. Then we'll discuss on the basic principle of environmental audit reporting. We're also going to discuss on the general steps in environmental audit reporting, and we'll have our discussion and conclude. Environmental audit report refers to preparation, presentation, and communication of information relating to an organization's interaction with the natural environment. Having known this, I would like to also define what an environment is. So an environment is the sum total of all the living and non-living elements and their effects that influences human life. So as an organization, having to do your operations, you will need to interact with the environment. And as an environmentalist, there are three basic aspects of the environment that are very important to us. We have the land, the water, and the air. And you all will agree with me that all our interaction is built on these various aspects of the environment. So while conducting environmental audit reporting, you need to prepare and communicate your findings as related to the organizations and how the interaction of the environment or the company to the environment, be it positive or negative. Having said that, we can now discuss on the principles. So what I have done is to highlight 6 basic principles for environmental audit reporting. And the first principle I have here is relevance. Relevance is very key. We also have quantitative. Quantitative in terms of information. We have accuracy, completeness, consistency, and transparency. So I will be defining some of these concepts to you with examples as we proceed. When we talk about relevance, relevance is critical to ensuring that the data and information reported reflects the organization's environmental impact and are meaningful and valuable to the organization. This simply means that as an auditor, whatever data I am getting or whatever research I'm doing should be centered around the company and its environment, and it should be meaningful. Let me take, for example, if I'm consulted to write an audit report, for example, a pharmaceutical company, and I am putting details of a paper and pulp company, or I'm putting details of a construction operations, it clearly shows that what I'm writing is not relevant to the report I'm writing. So relevance is very key, and relevance is key because the information and data you are providing should actually pinpoint the areas of concerns of the company. So whenever we are writing an audit, we should make sure we pay reference or keep reference to relevancy in terms of research work. Even when we are collating our data we are collating in terms of baseline should also be relevant to their operations. You should have known the kind of pollutions that this particular company can produce and have those indices in terms of analysis that are relevant to their operations. Let's take, for example, a company that do not have that is a wet production, that has a wet production process, and a company that has a dry production process. What I mean in essence is that some companies have effluent because of their production process requires water to complete their production, while others do not need water. That's the difference between the dry process and the wet process. In doing so, if I'm doing an analysis, what indices should I focus on? What pollution indicators should I focus on? For a company that do not have business with having to emit wastewater into the environment, should I be bothering myself on analyzing effluents, or I should be just checking on the groundwater? So those are the examples of relevance I want to talk about. Also, quantitative. Your information must be accompanied by narrative that explains its significance and implication. So you must be quantitative in your reporting. It means that you must have good information that are accompanied by narrative explanation. Like I just mentioned a few while ago about the looking at the pollution parameters we should be looking at. It means that those informations you have must have explanation. You don't just give us tables, and after you're giving us tables, there's no explanation. How will they understand? That's why a proper report, after you have your analysis table, you should also have a summary of what you've analyzed, which is giving reference to a point to the company in terms of where they should look at, if they are polluting or they are not. Are they working in line with the standard or not? So you should have narrative. You shouldn't just give figures and leave it at that. And also your action plan. Action plans basically come as a result of your audit findings. Once you do your audit findings, you move into recommendations. Your recommendations can now give rise into your action plan. And this action plan must be measurable so that implementation of those actions should have a timeline to ensure total compliance. What I mean is, when giving an action plan, you should have a measure to it in terms of timeline. What is the period of completion that is expected of the company? In most cases, for example, we have different regulatory bodies that are also saddled with the responsibility of protecting the environment. We have the national body known as NESRA. NESRA means the National Environmental Standard and Regulation Enforcement Agency, which was brought into law in 2007. This enforcement agency is saddled with the responsibility to ensure that companies around Nigeria are conforming to a clean environment and also environmental protection. In the states, we have different SEPAs. SEPAs means State Environmental Protection Agencies. For Lagos State, we have LASEPA. For Ogun State, we have OGEPA, and so forth. So these actions should be tailored according to their timeline of deliverable. For NESRA, you have a 3-year span for an environmental audit. For OGEPA, you have a 2-year span. So your action plan should be tailored towards those particular areas to ensure complete compliance. Also, very important is accuracy. Our information should be accurate. Information should be sufficiently accurate and precise. We are having issues with accuracy and preciseness of information even in the country. We had the issue of the have some network issues, which has been rectified. So we were talking about accuracy. Now, when we are talking about accuracy, accuracy, as I've defined in the previous statement, has to do with information. And I was also giving an example on the issues we have in the country as regards information dissemination from the federal, the Minister of Information and other agencies that we had other informations. Okay, what is my point? My point is, because there is no coordination, the coordination has allowed for the information coming in not to be accurate, and it always gives a bad representation of the consultant or the government. And we can bring it back to this definition. Your information must be sufficiently accurate and precise, because this will enable the users to understand the relevance of the information with reasonable level of confidence. So once you don't provide accurate information, the confidence the client will have on the consultant will have reduced, because if I'm bringing out an information and it's different from what is the norm, it means that I've not done a good job. Strive to reduce uncertainties in your report figures. It means that you must be factual. Where you have uncertainties, you should try to reduce it as reasonable possible. It happens, but it should be reduced. Then we have to talk about completeness. Your information must be complete. Information that is relevant to both the internal and external users needs to be complete. Now, let me give a brief highlight on this. Once you are writing an audit report, it is an information that is relevant to the company, which is the client, and is also relevant to other stakeholders. Because at the point of submission of this report, it becomes a public document. So whatever information you are providing should be relevant to the company itself. And I'm also using this medium to call on the HSE officers we have. We should always take time to review our reports properly to ensure that information that are there are a complete representation of our company. Because once this report gets out of once it's been sent to the regulatory body, it becomes an external used by external people. And sometimes if you have a report and I have a job to do, maybe within that community or within that area, I can always use your report as a reference. So what informations are there? Is it a complete representation of what is there? And like I said, most consultants have fallen prey to this, because most of the time they try as much as possible to reduce the information because they feel it is not going to be good in the good image of the company. But it's not true. Most times we have this information for this company and also give them ways on improvement, which is the most important thing, to improve the environmental management system of the company and also its compliance level. I don't know if yeah, everybody can hear me also, and if you've been following, please can you indicate if you can still hear me and if you can still see my slides?
Yeah, I can see your slide and
Thank you.
can hear you. Thank you for
Go ahead.
introduction.
Go ahead.
I can still hear you and your slide is still okay.
Thank you so much. So lastly, on these basic principles, we'll be talking about consistency. Consistency is very important. Your information must be consistent. And it is an issue that I feel many organizations do not even understand how necessary it is. Because from my years of writing different audits for different companies, I've come to understand that most companies tend to hide away from showcasing the reality of what happens in the company. And they also take time to try to manipulate the standard indicators so that it will favor the company. But it is a very wrong approach, and we should desist from it. We should ensure that we remove that aspect of trying to change what is already happening to us. Because once you do that, it becomes impossible. It becomes impossible for you to improve. So whatever the situation in terms of environmental compliance, environmental pollution, always allow your consultant to give the right representation of what is happening. And also, while reviewing your reports, always ensure that the consultant is giving us the right representation of what is happening to you. Any change to data, organizational boundaries, method, or any other relevant factors must be documented. What I mean by this is, if there are changes are necessary. Let's assume that I come for the first audit and I see a non-compliance. And on coming to the next audit, there's an improvement. I shouldn't leave the fact that there was a non-compliance and there was an improvement. It should be well documented. So the documentation shouldn't just be that, oh, the factory is fine. No, it should show us the progress of improvement. And it's always very good for the company to also measure their improvement growth. Let's talk about transparency. All relevant issues must be addressed in factual, understandable, and coherent manner, keeping records of all assumptions. Transparency is very key. And I want to also say that transparency will be tied to accurate reporting. We must be transparent as consultants when representing our information, our findings. And also, as a company, you should be able to ensure that you are also transparent in terms of when you are giving out information. Do not hide information from the consultant, because once the consultant knows that, they can now advise. But once there's no transparency on the part of the company or the HSC personnel or compliance officer, then the consultant might not have enough data. And also, as consultant, let's endeavor to be transparent in our information. And it is very important that information we are giving must be factual. It must be factual means that you must have a way to measure or a way to prove that that information is correct. And one of the things is that we have most of consultants having issues like this is in terms of baseline analysis reporting. They tend to try to manipulate the result, and it always comes to a point where it is not good. And when you are writing your report, it should be understandable. We know we are environmentalists and we've read a lot, but when you are presenting your information, everybody should be able to understand. Data finding during the audit should be accompanied by a description of how the data has been collected. So when you are presenting Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. We are back. We just discussed about transparency. So before we move further, I would want to ask, as HSC officers and compliant officers, are there ways where we've had issues with either the consultant or even ourselves based on the following principles we've just outlined there in having a good environmental audit reporting? I'll take few observations before we move. Okay, can you all hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So please, do we have HSC officers in the house? Okay. Do we have HSC officers? Can we discuss on issues that has arisen based on these principles? Let's assume you've been able to review a report and you found out that some of these things are not part.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? There are some people making noise at the background. Can you...
Please, can we all mute our mics? Okay, I was asking a question on, we've discussed briefly on what environmental audit reporting is, the basic principles, and under the principles, we discussed about relevance, quantitative accuracy, completeness, consistency, and transparency. So I wanted to ask if there are any comments on those above discussed subjects before we move on. Okay, if we don't have, yes, you can. Yes, you can, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And also thank you, Kevron, for using this, your medium, to also continue to pass knowledge and also share knowledge. I want to 100% agree with the presenter on these principles. These are fundamental principles for any audit and for those of us who are auditors. However, in the course of operations and carrying out audits, one area we will face a lot of challenge is the area of transparency. I think is one area where, because especially in this climate where we belong, when I mean this climate, I talk about Africa, the third developing world. A lot of times organizations don't comply to the standards or the clauses or the criteria for the audit, whether it's internal audits or external audit, but they want to get a good performance at the outcome of the result of the audit. So most times it becomes a challenge where you see things that are not meeting up with the requirements of the standard, and the organization wants you to try to manage it and give them a commendation, either not a major non-conformance, or in some cases they want you to say it's a minor non-conformance, and also look at the way how they can get certified. And if it is an internal audit within the organization, the department that is being audited, yes, they may lack their faults, they may have their faults, but still everybody wants to paint itself good. So I think we as professionals who carry out this audit should find a way to also educate people in this order. First of all, knowing that this audit, if it is an internal audit within the organization, is to improve the system. And improving the system, it calls for everyone, both the auditee and the auditor, to be transparent. Because if the auditor is not transparent and the auditee is not transparent, the objective of the audit will not be achieved. So we need to talk to people about this. This is another advocacy around auditing that people need to understand, that transparency is very key. It's the only way you can improve the system, because if you give me a forceful information, certainly I will write a forceful result or forceful report. And at the end of the day, the whole process of the objective, of the audit objective, will not be met. So these are the points I just want to raise, and I just want to also put out here for us that these 6 criteria you've just put up here, or principles, are very key for a successful audit, whether you're an auditor or you're an auditee. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jude. I think you just hit the nail on the head. Do we have other comments before we move on?
Okay, yeah, good afternoon. My name is Nicholas. I honestly want to appreciate Jude for saying that. I was just going to say that it's actually very important that before we go ahead to carry out an audit, objectives should actually be set. Because if an organization is able to set objective, then its transparency actually start from there. Before even going ahead to set the criteria of the audit and all of that, what really does the organization want? What actually they intend to achieve, from the process or from the audit? So if this is done at the beginning, then I'm sure it will help to take away the idea of trying to hold information, trying to keep things away from the auditor. I think it's actually a very good one. Then thank you, presenter, for such an impactful presentation. Actually, it's really eye-opening, and I look forward to listening to the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your input, Mr. Nick. I think we have room for one more comment, or if there's none, we can proceed. Do we have anybody that wants to comment before we proceed on that?
Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon.
I really appreciate this program. It is an enlightening. Let me say, for instance, it should be of good practice if the environmental principle, especially Nigeria as a case study, is being used. And I want to join everybody, both the participants and the facilitators, because especially the knowledge in the Bible after the class, then after we do our research, so that we can be able to empirically use this knowledge, especially now where we are going through environmental, what is it called, global warming. Now we are seeing cases of impact of greenhouse effects, even in our various zones, especially in Lagos, some lowland areas in Nigeria and part of the world. So we should start telling our people who we live with, that there is true effect, there is true impact. If we are not trying to put these things into practical, then we should try and indulge. And how are we going to prepare for in case of emergencies? So this is what I just want to put, so that it will be of both theoretical and it's a, what is it called, a rescue emergency plan for our neighbors. Because the countries here, especially Nigeria, the case study, the government, they have their own limited what they can use or what they can do. But how can we individuals prepare for that and carry this as in Nigeria? Because the knowledge we have, we should be able to use it to help the society with that. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Okay, I want us to take, I want to advise we take a 1-minute break so that we can stretch our leg before we go to the last part of presentation. If you have your bottle of tea, water rather, or a cup of tea, you can sip it. Then also, if you have questions, you can note your question down, or you can send it to the group chat. At the end of this session, we have a point to answer those questions and also to have a discussion. So let's take the 1-minute break to stretch and we'll come back. Thank you all. Okay, thank you all for joining back, and I hope we've taken that moment to stretch and also relax ourselves as we proceed. So we are going into the next aspect of the discussion, which is a general step to environmental audit reporting. In this step, we are going to be discussing about, we are going to talk about how to determine the boundaries of the organization. We are going to also look at ways to identify key environmental impacts of the organization. We are going to look at how we can measure our findings, and also we are going to look at tips that will help in providing good reports. How do we determine the scope? Now, I use the word scope/boundaries because when determining your environmental audit, you need to define your scope in areas of the size of the facility. What areas are you going to be concentrating on as per the operational areas? What kind of analysis will be carried out rather? What parameters are we going to analyze depending on the peculiarity of the organization? It is necessary to define the areas of the operation to be reported, meaning it is very, very important to set organizational boundary. The scope should include everything under the organization's control, which means when you are looking at the scope of the audit, it should be an entirety of what the organization is, what are the operational areas, what are the environmental concerns, what are our pollution streams, how do we manage community engagement, and the rest of it. So everything that can influence or impact the environment based on our operations should be looked at when determining the scope of the audit. It is also very necessary when we look at the key environmental impacts. It is very necessary to understand which environmental issues are key. And during the initial session, we had someone talking about the greenhouse gases and depletion. This is where you can now need to understand which issue is peculiar to your operations, and also understand the extent of the impact. You need to identify your activities that are directly impacting the environment or can cause pollutions. We can also look at activities that could result as a result, that could impact as a result of cumulative activities. Once this is clear, we can now point where this impact occurs. We are going to look at the key environmental impacts. I've listed out 6 of them. The first is the greenhouse gases. We all could agree with me that during the Fashola regime, the government of Lagos State realized that there are more production, or there's more emission of CO2 gases because of the number of people in Lagos State to the oxygen we have. So the government decided to say, well, let's begin to plant trees so that we can have more production of oxygen. These are ways to buffer this emission of greenhouse gases. There are other gases that can come as a result of our emissions from our generators, from utility cars, from even some of our equipment. It is very important to note all these areas, because these are the key indicators in generating what are your impacts during the audit. I discussed about water. Now we are looking at the groundwater. Your operations, is there a direct impact to the groundwater, or there is no impact to the groundwater? You also need to identify that. When we talk about waste is an issue that has taken over so many companies, and right now I think the government is helping, because we now have the likes of the Ogwama in Ogun State, we have the likes of the Loma in Lagos State to help these facilities manage this waste. But then we have to look at internally, how is our waste management practice going? Do we fully understand what waste management is? Do we practice waste segregation? Do we even know where our waste is going to after offtake from the facility? We have, based on our duty of care, it is important we know where our waste are going to, be it the general waste or the hazardous waste. We need to know. How many of us practice all this? During environmental audits, these are areas that we have to look at. So when you're carrying out the environmental audit, you need to look at the waste streams. You need to look at how waste management is. You need to look at what happens to their waste. Most companies, they don't even understand that waste now is money. You see some companies, because I've based on my involvement with different companies, because they don't understand the principles of waste management. They just they gather all their waste in one particular section, and once the off-taker comes, they just push everything. It is a very poor means of waste management. Aside it, how do we have proper labeling practice of our waste bins? These are the questions that an environmental consultant is to ask when he goes for an audit. And also as HSE officer, these are what we should look at. Proper segregations of waste is very, very important. We look at material resource efficiency. For me, if I was to be an MD of a company, once I see an audit report, I would want to look at this part of the audit report. But over the years, we've realized that most HSE officers, most compliance officers, even most consultants do not know the importance of having to give accurate figures in terms of resource efficiency, because this is where money, the company is knowing how efficient their process is in terms of reducing waste, or is it reducing waste, or we are losing so much money in waste. For example, when we look at the material balance sheet during an audit, you have the inputs, which are your raw materials, and we have the outputs. Now, for your outputs, the output is divided into two. We have the useful output and we have the waste. Now, once your output is not useful, then it's waste. And once it's waste, it means you are losing money. It means your system is not efficient. And obviously it brings us down to where we calculate the material utilization efficiency. And these calculations are very good. Now, providing accurate information for these calculations are very, very important. And consultants should also make sure that they do their due diligence to ensure that they actually have the right information and they do not doctor information for this part of the report, because it is very, very important. Also, you look at your interaction within the biodiversity sphere, the ecosystem, you look at your plants, you look at the flora, the fauna. How is our operation impacting this part of the biodiversity sphere? Also, we look at emission to air. How are we relating to the land? Do we dispose our products or hazardous products indiscriminately to the land, thereby polluting the soil and polluting the land? Let's take, for example, you are working in a base, you are working in a company that produces base oil, and once you have your waste, you just throw it into the green area. Over time, you begin to see that green area becomes yellow, and over time it becomes black. It means that you've killed the potential for that land area to produce green. Same goes for chemical industries. So it means that it is also very important to protect the land, because once you are done with your process in that area, during reclamation, you are supposed to bring that particular land back to its original state. But if you've killed the potential of that land to produce life, it means you are not doing any good to that particular area. Also, we discussed about wastewater and surface water. This is key to industries that produces a whole lot of wastewater, that their processes are wet. You will need to ensure that your wastewater are properly treated, either by a standard effluent treatment plant or a standard oil water separator pit, to ensure that those wastewater are properly treated, analyzed, and have been certified okay for release. These are very important issues that a consultant should look at while carrying out his audits. And also, even as HSE officer, we should also ensure that we keep a compliance to this stated issue. Measuring. There are several ways to collect and manage data for organizations, but it is recommended to use a standard reporting format. A standard reporting format will ensure that your report can always be benchmarked at all times. Lastly, we want to discuss about the tips of environmental reporting. We've discussed this previously, but we can also shed more light on it. Transparency is essential to producing a credible report. The report must be produced in a balanced and transparent fashion. While weighing areas of success, it is just as important to highlight areas indicating negative impact. The report should include a summary of how each of the steps listed above was carried out and the outcome reached. Very important. The report must be clear and concise about the importance and reason for the data collected. You must have areas where you give explanations for the data collected and reasons. Assumptions, methodologies, and reference used must be indicated as part of your report. Also, it is good to identify the risks and opportunities that arise from the impact of the environment and from the environment's impact on the organization, while recommending a strategy that addresses this risk. Risk assessment is very important. Environmental risk assessment is very important because it gives rooms for us to understand our opportunities and areas where we need to improve. In all this that I've said, I know it has actually struck a bit in us. It's either we are seeing our areas of improvement, or we are also seeing an area of strength where we need to improve upon. I hope with this very few discussion, I've been able to pass across messages that will help us improve our general steps when conducting environmental audit reporting, and also as compliance officer, ways to review reports properly. And I want to thank you all for listening. I want to pass this on to the admin now for the other part of the presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Ayodele Dare, for providing this costly information and sharing insightful knowledge on environmental audit reporting. So during this session, I learned that we should be transparent, and also companies should not hide information from their environmental consultants. And I sure know that the session has connected various environmental audit challenges to diverse, easy solutions in engaging parties, especially participants that are concerned in this webinar, as well as improving different participants' organizational environmental reputation, also targeting the increase in profitability of their business. So Mr. Derek, kindly grab a cup of water. Thank you so much for your session, while we have room for discussions. Yeah, so I'll be bringing up more, there were two questions that were dropped at the chat box. And one came from Mr. Udo Unse. He said, please, what are the steps in audit preparation? Can you kindly attend to that, please?
Okay, thank you so much for that question. I think that's another discussion for maybe another webinar. But generally, I'm just going to give an overview. We have basically 3 steps in audit preparation. We have the pre-audit preparation, we have the on-site audit investigation and data collection, and we also have the post-audit phase. Now, there are different steps in these phases. In the pre-audit, you need to discuss with your client, you need to set timelines, you need to set the scope. During the audit, you need to go for your site visitation, you have to generate your audit findings, you have to take your baselines analysis, and for the post-audit, you look at the preparation of the reporting total, preparation of your draft reports, having to review the reports before final approval. So those are general steps that we could take in when we are carrying out an audit. I don't know if that answered your question.
All right, there are still more questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Ayodele, for buttressing that. So the other question came from Mr. Genius Okoye. He said, how frequently should environmental audits, internal and external, be conducted in a company? Can you kindly give answer to that?
Okay, thank you very much. While I was discussing earlier, I made mention that an environmental audit report is actually a compliance report, and it's demanded by regulatory agencies. Now, depending on which agency is requesting for your reports, if the NESDRA is requesting for your report, it means you are doing it once in 3 years. I'm also sure LASEPA does theirs too once in 3 years. But if you're in a place like Ogun State, you do yours once in 2 years. So it depends on the SEPA and also what their guidelines states. But these are just the brief. So we can do it in that manner. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll take this last one from Samuel Batsugo. Mr. Samuel, why do I need an environmental audit report from my organization, regardless of the fact of environmental non-compliance all around? Probably he's talking about Nigeria. So, thank you, Mr. Ayodele.
Okay, like I've said before, the environmental audit report is a compliance report. Aside the fact that it helps you show your strength internally and areas of improvement in terms of environmental compliance. But to answer this question, I want to give you an illustration to what happened a few years back, there was a company in Ogun State that the community decided to write a petition against the company because they saw a bit of pollution in their groundwater. Now, once that petition got to the state agency, they had to look into their records that if there's a petition, do we have records showing the actual pollution indicators or compliance reports showing the different levels of their analysis, and if they actually meet the norm. And in doing so, they found out that this company actually has their reports, and their reports were always in conformity to their standard. So they decided to do further investigation. Now, what's the point I'm trying to bring up here? If there was no record, I'm sure it will have taken another tone, but because they have a record, so aside being beneficial to your company in terms of improvement, when you talk about environmental compliance, it is also regulatory, and also it prevents you from getting unnecessary summons from the government when we have community disputes. And looking at, and one thing that also I would like to buttress is the fact that during the investigation, they realized that this company is situated in an industrial zone. So there are other companies within that facility. So it means that if they are not the one polluting, there should be someone, the pollution will come from other companies. So in doing so, they were able to, streamline the.
Please kindly stay on call. Probably there's a challenge with his network.
I think we can't hear, I can't hear anything.
Yes, please kindly stay on the call. Please kindly stay on the call. I'm sure it should be his network. Please, let's give him some time.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Kevin, while we wait for a delay to show up, just want to add my voice to what he was trying to say. Am I permitted?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Jude. Please go on.
Okay, I'll just give 2-3 points in addition to the benefits of having an audit report. Like he has said, is an act to measure your level of compliance. If you cannot measure, then you're not moving, rather you're stagnant. For every organization, for you to know your progression, you need to measure. It's also a compliance requirement. Every organization, by the national standard, Federal Ministry of Environment, despite the states where you reside or your businesses reside, it is expected by law that you carry out these audits and your reports by an independent auditor. Again, it is also an act of evidence in a case of litigation. It's an act of evidence in a case of litigation, like he was trying to say, where incident happened and the company was sued and they had to show up their reports that they've been doing this. That is another one. Again, is one very important for those of us who have been in this business for a couple of years now. Currently, what we call the lenders and the donors, for them to invest in your businesses, whatever business you are now, currently, they have to look out for these documents. It's more like your sustainability report. So nobody wants to invest in a business where you're polluting. Nobody wants to invest in a business where you're running in waste. Nobody wants to invest in your business. We're hearing of the COP27 that is coming up in Egypt in the coming months, in less than a week or so. These are part of what international vendors, international lenders or donors want to see. Even in Nigeria, if you are in that high position in your organization, your management will always ask you to bring this report, especially when they want to get loans from the bank, because the banks want to see your sustainability plan. They want to see your sustainability report. And whereby you don't have this is a strong deficit on you that your chances of getting loan will become difficult. So it is also from the moral standpoint, you know, like we always speak about the health and safety that is based on morals, is based on finance and based on ethics. So it is also a moral requirement for you to keep the environment sustainable, for you to keep the environment in a way that the future generation can come and use it. That is the essence why you do this. And not to forget, lastly, that if you comply environmentally, you will save more money for your business. You will grow revenue. Imagine where you're running to waste. We're talking about water, we're talking about energy, and you use them without measuring. Sometimes a lot of companies lose a lot of revenue in those areas. You check how many times in a day do you pump water for your organization, and what is the water usage? Maybe you're using a wet system, like he was trying to explain to us, where I use water like Coca-Cola, like Guinness, where they use a lot of water. Go to those organizations, they measure the quantity of water they use, and they measure the volume of energy they use per day. So these are natural resources that you must sustain because they add value to the ecosystem. If the ecosystem is compromised, then all of us are gone. It's a circle. You need the ecosystem to balance. So it is a requirement, it is a duty of care, it is a moral requirement, it is a regulatory requirement, and is also a requirement that helps your business have advantage over your competitors, you know. So it is something that you can be a selling point, a success story for you, and also a sustainability report for you going forward. So these are just a few contributions.
Thank you, Mr. Jude. And I hope we can put that into practice too in our various companies. Like you rightly mentioned, aside it being compliant, you can also use it for loan application to facilitate your loan, including other environmental required documents such as your EIA. And for now, I'm sure because of the carbon issue we've been having for our products, most international companies will also request that you get your permit, your waste and toxic permit from NESRA, and also your air quality permit. So these are other permits that you can also use to facilitate loans. But thank you so much for that addition. I also want to apologize for the bridging network the other time back. So if there are any more questions, we can quickly answer them before we close the webinar. Or if you have other comments.
Okay, just one comment from me. In the area of your slide where you're talking about identification of boundaries, I will just advise as an addendum to add the noise in that order which you added: water, soil, environment, and all that. We can also measure noise because it's one area people don't really look into, and it's very key for our environment, and it's part of occupational health.
Yes. Basically, what we did there was to mention the air quality. Now, when we are looking at the air quality and the noise, it goes hand to hand. But thanks for your addition. So are there other questions?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, this is Monica Nwosu. Well done, Dari. That was very insightful and informative. And thank you also to the last speaker. Sorry, I'm trying to get your name. That was very insightful contribution. Yeah, someone dropped a question on the chat. I'm sure you would answer that shortly, but I just wanted to quickly add my thoughts to the question before you take it further. Person was asking that what's the main difference between an environmental report in a construction site and that of an oil and gas industry. So I just wanted to quickly add that basically the art, like you had rightly stated, the outlay and output, outlay, the way it would be laid out and the headings would basically be the same thing, but the key difference will be the environmental aspects and the impacts that we're looking at. So like the right speaker has rightly mentioned, like for instance, noise. Noise will be applicable in oil and gas. It will also be applicable in a construction industry or in a construction site. However, when you are now looking at the environmental, of course, both are environmental aspects. So environmental aspect, of course, we know are the things that we release or discharge. It could be solid, it could be gaseous, it could be waste. So the environmental aspects are basically the things that we release as a result of what we do that impact on the environment. So the impacts of these aspects and how significant they are vis-a-vis regulatory requirements would be different. And those are the things that will reflect in your environmental report. So if you take an environmental report from a typical construction site, you want to look at the significance of the aspects based on the, so the significance of the impacts based on the, well, whatever it is that is their environmental aspect. So the noise, for instance, in a construction site, expectedly would be higher. Well, it depends on the activity, and then other aspects of oil and gas may not be as high. So I just wanted to quickly add that, and I'm sure you want to take that question further when you're looking at the difference between the environmental report. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Umo. So just adding to what you said, also you have to also note that these reports are required by two different regulatory agencies. For the oil and gas, we know the oil and gas is being regulated by the NMDPRA, which is the Nigeria Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Agency. The agency is a, harmonized, was harmonized with the DPR, the PPRA, and the PEFMB. Now, under that, the guideline that guides the oil and gas sector is known as the EGASPIN. Now, we're looking at the environmental guidelines and standards for petroleum industries in Nigeria. Now, basically, that is the guideline that would be followed while we are writing that report. For a construction for a construction process, we are looking at the NESDRA guideline, which we are looking at the guideline that guides that kind of construction, which actually can be seen in the SI number 19 of 2011. So now, basically, let me break it down. While writing an audit report, the first thing you need to know is understand the sector. What sector am I writing an audit report in? Because inside the guidelines, you have the individual parameters that should be analyzed, crucial to that particular sector. Just like what the last speaker said, in a construction place, you have the issue of noise resulting from the mixer, the trucks coming in and out, and the likes. But if you go to an oil and gas facility, let's assume a depot would have lesser noise, but now would have more impact on the air in terms of pollution for hydrocarbons. So you have to be looking at the likes of the methane gas exposure, the likes of the H2S, hydrogen sulfide, and the likes. So each guidelines, each sector is guided by a particular guideline. So you need to look at the guideline before you dive into it. So these are one of the most important thing you should note when you are coming up with an audit report. You have to understand which sector you are writing the audit report, and the report must be tailored according to the guideline of that sector. Picking an audit report that should be tailored for the oil and gas and writing it for a construction or a manufacturing, obviously you'll be way off the balance, and which talks about relevance. I know we talked about relevance. So this is where relevance comes into play. So you need to understand the sector and do your proper research and use the appropriate guideline. Even in manufacturing, we have different guidelines from NESRA that accrue to them. So the same guideline would not be applicable for a pharmaceutical company and might not be pharmaceutical for a metal and steel company, because those are different operations. So you need to understand the operation, understand the guideline that guides their operation, and look at the regulatory agency that's in charge of their operations, and ensure that the report is in line with that particular aspect. Then every other thing that has to do with monitoring, baseline, sampling will now be captured under the report based on their guidelines. And you should also understand that these particular industries have different limits in terms of pollutions. So those should also be put into consideration. I don't know if that answered that.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Ayodele Dare. I think we lost him on the call, and thank you, everybody. Will that be all from your end before we let Mr. Engineer Kayode Fowode to be on the call? Is there any observation, or do you have any other?
These are an overview.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abisola Gbenga Martins. On me, some construction companies also have batching plants where a lot of water is used. Yeah, we've learned so much on the environmental auditing report importance. And then we definitely understand that many people and many companies as an individual is definitely going to take this to use. And to this end, we want you to check on the charts. There are courses that the Kevron Consulting Limited will also be offering very soon. And then we have more that has been dropped on the chat box. Please kindly scroll through your chat box and register on the chat box. We'll be having the EIA coming up in 30th of November to 2nd December 2022. The ISO 14001 course, which is important in becoming a lead auditor. We also be holding by Kevron Consulting Limited in 12 to 16 December 2022. And the effluent monitoring course as well from 1st to 2nd December 2022, as well as waste management in 1st to 2nd December 2022 as well. So we want to thank our principal consultant in the house, Mr. Ayodele Dare. Thank you so much for the wonderful webinar. We say thank you to every other participants. We'll always have more of this. Watch out for more of our webinar series. And thank you once again. Please do follow Kevron Consulting. Look up, and we'll see you again another time. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. God bless you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Engineer Kayode on the call now. I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you join us. Paul, I also want to thank our senior consultant, Dare Ayodele, for leading this session. And of course, I can see some of our leaders in the house, in the industry as well. Thank you, Monica Nwosu. I also want to say a special thank you to Jude as well for adding a voice to this presentation. We could not have had it better. And to everyone who has made contributions, who have dropped questions, we want to say a special thank you to you all as well. So we look forward to more presentations. For everyone who has joined today, we'll be sending you electronic certificates to actually confirm that you're a part of this webinar and you've learned about environmental audit reporting as well. So do have a nice week. Bye for now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
It was a very good one.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Monica. God bless you.
Yeah, very good one. Well
Mr.
done,
Dari,
guys.
thank
Well
you,
done.
sir.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
very
Yeah,
much,
thank you,
Mr.
Dari.
Dari.
Thank
Very
you,
good
everyone.
writing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoy your weekend, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all
Nice
for
weekend.
attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me have it.
Are you doing? I thought they were playing music for them.
Yeah, they are playing music for that.